Many were civilians who went into the street unarmed to challenge the military and were mowed down by machine gun fire or run over by tanks.
You know how they say a picture's worth 1,000 words? Well, some pictures were worth way more than that. One photo actually ended child labor in America. Another one was so atrocious, it helped put Nazi war criminals behind bars. But here's the crazy part. When these photos first came out, people in power tried to hide them. China's one-child policy created nightmares like this picture. American visitors found this abandoned baby dying on a path in 1997, and in response, hospital staff actually told them they should have just left the kid there because this girl was one in over 1 million girls who got abandoned every year, as families desperately wanted boys instead. In 2015, a dad barricaded himself in a hospital with a gun when doctors said his son was brain dead and wanted to pull life support. During the SWAT standoff, the supposedly brain-dead boy squeezed his father's hand, proving he was conscious. The kid made a full recovery. Kevin Carter shot this starving Sudanese child being stalked by a vulture in '93. The Pulitzer Prize-winning image sparked debates about whether photographers should intervene or just document suffering. Carter killed himself the next year, haunted by what he'd seen and the criticism he got. The first Bikini Atoll nuclear test in 1946 came after islanders agreed to temporary evacuation for testing that would benefit humanity.
A whole town of specially chosen types of buildings with dummies inside them has been erected to study survival chances in an atomic explosion.
Instead, the US set off 23 nukes on their home between 46 and 58, making it radioactive and uninhabitable for decades, while the displaced people struggled to survive elsewhere. This Romanian scientist, Emil Racovița, just became the first person ever photographed underwater in 1909. Louis Boutin had to invent a completely waterproof camera housing just to capture this single shot. He is known as Whipped Peter, an escaped slave whose scarred back became one of the most powerful anti-slavery images in American history. Peter had endured brutal whippings on John and Bridget Lyons' Louisiana plantation, where overseer Artayu Carrier nearly beat him to death. The scars covering his back formed raised keloid tissue that never healed. After escaping through swamps for 10 days, dodging bloodhounds and slave catchers, Peter reached a Union Army camp in Baton Rouge in March 1863. When photographers McPherson and Oliver captured his back during medical examination, the horrifying image spread across the North as carte de visite cards, finally giving Americans undeniable visual proof of slavery's brutal cruelty. This crying Chinese baby became the weapon that turned America against Japan years before Pearl Harbor even happened.
Have witnessed this morning the distant view, the Battle of Pearl Harbor.
H.S. Wong captured this heartbreaking scene at Shanghai's bombed train station in 1937 during Japan's brutal assault on China. Americans had viewed Japan as a peaceful, tea-drinking nation of cherry blossoms and geishas. This single image shattered that illusion completely, showing the world Japan's true military aggression. This specific shot from Pittston, Pennsylvania in January 1911 was by Louis Hine was investigating how mining companies dodged existing child labor laws when he photographed these boys. Every single kid lied about their age. Sam Bellum claimed 14 but clearly wasn't. Sam Topent got defensive, saying, "I'm 14 years, and if you don't believe me, I can show you the proofs." Little Mikey Captain said 12 but didn't even look that old. These children were coached to lie so mines could exploit them legally. Coal companies and desperate families worked together, trapping kids as young as 8 in this system. No less heartbreaking are these actual handprints carved into asbestos walls of a Nazi torture chamber on Boulevard Victor in Paris. SS officers strapped prisoners to chairs and sent electrical currents through their bodies during interrogations. As voltage coursed through them, victims frantically clawed at the thick asbestos soundproofing, desperately trying to escape the pain. The Nazis used this material to muffle screams, but it accidentally preserved every scratch and handprint. Roger Schall, previously an approved Nazi photographer, documented this horror after liberation in '44. His brother published these photos in a mandatory Paris book, providing evidence for post-war war crime prosecutions. Now, this next image is from when America was fighting in Vietnam, supposedly helping South Vietnam against communist North Vietnam. The US government told Americans we were the good guys, protecting innocent villagers from enemy soldiers. But Army photographer Ron Haberly captured this Vietnamese mother desperately shielding her daughter at My Lai on March 16, 1968, moments before both were murdered by American soldiers. Charlie Company entered this peaceful farming village believing Viet Cong fighters were hiding there, but found only unarmed civilians going about their daily lives. Instead of protecting them, American troops massacred up to 500 innocent people, Haberle risked court-martial documenting this war crime. These stacked skulls reveal Pol Pot's absolute horror in Cambodia from 1975 to 79. The Khmer Rouge seized power partly due to anti-American sentiment from U.S. bombing campaigns during the Vietnam War. They forcibly relocated entire cities into rural labor camps, executing intellectuals, educated citizens, and minorities while imposing agrarian slave labor. When Vietnamese forces invaded in January 1979, they discovered mass graves at killing fields like Choyong Ek and torture sites like Tuol Sleng Prison. Roughly 1.7 million Cambodians, a quarter of the population, died from execution, starvation, and forced labor. This terrified Jewish boy, with his hands raised during the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in 1943, became one of the most important pieces of evidence in post-war war crimes trials. When SS troops arrived to deport the remaining residents to concentration camps, they encountered desperate resistance from Jews who knew they were marching to their deaths. Emily Davison ducked under railings at the 1913 Epsom Derby and grabbed the reins of King George V's horse with a suffragette flag tied around her body. The horse knocked her down and kicked her, fracturing her skull.
In fact, she's just to the right, and I think he tries to jump her. He pricks his ears.
She died 4 days later from her injuries. This Oxford-educated woman had been imprisoned 8 times and force-fed by authorities. The incident was captured on film and reported worldwide, creating mixed reactions.
What I do feel is that she misjudged it and didn't realize how fast a moving horse is actually going.
Some viewed her as reckless, while others saw her sacrifice as necessary. Her funeral drew thousands of marchers through London. Women over 30 gained limited voting rights 5 years later in 1918, but equal voting rights for all women didn't come until 1921-1928, 15 years after Davison's death. University of Illinois student Phil Strang faces down National Guardsmen during May 1967 anti-war protests in Champaign-Urbana.
Thousands of demonstrators opposed to the Vietnam War assembled in the nation's capital for a mass protest.
As hundreds of thousands gathered nationwide opposing Vietnam, local campus protests erupted into days of clashes with tear gas, broken windows, and mass arrests.
Some 400 demonstrators are arrested, 2 soldiers are injured, and tear gas is used.
National Guard deployed with gas masks and bayoneted rifles to enforce curfews. In this iconic moment, Strang defiantly holds an unloaded rifle while staring down armed guardsmen, a gesture of resistance, not aggression. The standoff led to a week-long Guard occupation of campus. Now this will break your heart and inspire you at the same time. East German Guard Hans Conrad Schumann jumping over barbed wire into West Berlin in August 1961. Peter Liebing caught this split-second decision that changed this man's entire life forever. The Berlin Wall had just started going up, and this guard realized he had maybe 10 seconds to choose freedom or a lifetime of oppression. Craig Lewis became the world's first person to live without a heartbeat in 2011 when doctors at the Texas Heart Institute replaced his failing heart with continuous flow pumps. The 55-year-old man lived for more than a month with this artificial system, with his wife describing the strange humming sound the pumps made instead of a heartbeat. He literally had no pulse, but was still alive and conscious. Here's probably the longest prank ever. 2 English girls fooled the entire world with fake fairy photos around 1916. Elsie Wright and Frances Griffiths used paper cutouts to create images that convinced even Sherlock Holmes creator Arthur Conan Doyle that fairies were real. They didn't confess to this hoax until 1983, 67 years later. This is Ming, the ocean quahog clam, which had been living peacefully on the ocean floor for over 500 years before scientists accidentally killed it while trying to determine its age. This single organism had witnessed the rise and fall of empires, survived countless storms and climate changes, only to die because researchers wanted to count its growth rings. And now, this is an actual slave auction advertisement from Charleston in 1769, which lists 94 human beings from Sierra Leone like livestock for sale. These ads ran in colonial newspapers right next to farm equipment and household goods. Here you can see how German scientists measured facial features for racial classification around 1940, back when fake science was used to justify Nazi persecution. They literally used calipers like you'd measure a bolt, taking 27 different skull and face measurements including nose width, forehead slope, and ear angle. Anyone scoring outside their made-up Nordic ideal got marked for persecution. Wider nose? Jewish category, lose your citizenship. Rounder skull? Slavic subhuman, perfect for slave labor. The craziest part? The scientists doing this measuring often failed their own racial purity tests, but somehow that didn't stop them from deciding who lived or died based on millimeters. Then we have a priest holding a starving child's hand in Uganda during the 1980 drought. Mike Wells's photo moved the entire world like nothing before it. 500,000 people were starving, and this single image got more international aid flowing than any government report ever could. Moving to a different kind of hidden crisis, this photograph changed how America viewed AIDS forever. David Kirby's father comforts him as he dies from AIDS in 1989. Conservative opponents had fought against research funding, claiming AIDS only affected undesirable people. But this photo proved HIV affected entire families and deserved compassion, not judgment. A woman holds a photograph while Austrian prisoners return from Eastern Europe in 1947. Ernst Haas captured this heartbreaking scene at Vienna's railway station as families desperately searched for missing loved ones among 600 survivors. The returning prisoners smile with pure relief because they beat 60% death rates in Stalin's brutal camps. Over 2 million Germans got captured as slave labor to rebuild the USSR. Families like this woman waited 8 years, clutching faded photos, only to discover their sons died years earlier in frozen gulags. The craziest part, Stalin kept 20,000 German prisoners until 1953, releasing them only after he died himself. And this shows incredible innovation born from tragedy. Seamus Conlon photographed 21,000 Rwandan children who lost parents during the 1994 genocide. He gave each child a number and displayed photos in refugee camps so surviving relatives could find them. Though many remained orphaned, thousands of families were reunited through this brilliant system. And here we can see justice being served as 4 Lincoln assassination conspirators get hanged at Washington Arsenal in July 1865. After John Wilkes Booth shot President Lincoln at the theater, these 4 people helped him pull it off.
John Wilkes Booth shot Abraham Lincoln as he watched a play from a balcony in Ford's Theater.
Lewis Powell broke into the Secretary of State's house and stabbed him multiple times while the guy was bedridden from injuries. David Harold guided Booth's escape on horseback through Washington. George Atzerodt was supposed to murder the vice president but got cold feet and hit the bar instead. Mary Surratt owned the boarding house where they planned Lincoln's murder. All 4 got the death penalty after a massive trial with hundreds of witnesses, and this moment was captured on camera. But photographers also exposed injustice to create positive change. Jacob Riis revealed New York's most dangerous slum at Bandits Roost in 1888. His photograph of this crime-ridden alley helped convince city officials to demolish the area and build Columbus Park instead. Charles Lindbergh arrived in England after his solo transatlantic flight in May 1927. The 25-year-old pilot had flown 33 hours from New York to Paris, becoming an overnight international celebrity.
He would become an international hero and become the first aviator to fly non-stop from New York to Paris.
His successful crossing proved long-distance aviation was possible and launched the era of modern commercial flight. Woodstock brought together 400,000 young people in August 1969 for 3 days of peace and music. This happened during the Vietnam War, when kids were getting drafted to die in a jungle they'd never heard of. The festival was supposed to sell tickets for 50,000 people, but so many showed up they just said screw it and made it free. Jimi Hendrix played his legendary Star-Spangled Banner guitar solo, while Janis Joplin and The Who rocked a muddy farm field. Despite rain food shortages and terrible bathrooms, nobody rioted or fought. Instead, they shared everything and helped strangers, creating the biggest peaceful gathering in American history during one of its most violent decades. Joe Rosenthal almost missed this iconic flag raising on Iwo Jima in February '45. 6 guys hoisted a replacement flag on Mount Suribachi during one of the Pacific's most insane battles.
In 1945, U.S. Marines raised the American flag during the battle for Iwo Jima.
The Japanese had turned this tiny volcanic island into a fortress with miles of underground tunnels and hidden bunkers. Marines had to use flamethrowers to burn enemies out of caves while dodging sniper fire from every direction. 7,000 Americans died, and 20,000 got wounded in just 36 days of non-stop fighting. The Japanese refused to surrender, so it became brutal, hand-to-hand combat. Rosenthal stepped back right as the wind caught the flag, perfectly creating this accidental masterpiece that won the Pulitzer Prize. Eddie Adams photographed these 50 Vietnamese refugees crammed into this fishing boat heading to Thailand in 1977. After America pulled out of Vietnam, the communists took over and started persecuting anyone who had helped the South Vietnamese government, or Americans. Thousands of families packed onto tiny fishing boats, risking everything to escape. They headed to Thailand because it was the closest country that might let them in, but Thai authorities kept forcing refugee boats back out to sea, basically leaving them to die. Adams' photos of exhausted families, including crying children, reached Congress and shocked Americans into action. President Carter opened American doors to over 200,000 Vietnamese refugees, creating one of the largest humanitarian rescues in U.S. history. These iron lung machines kept polio victims alive when the disease paralyzed their breathing. People could spend years inside these metal tubes, only seeing what was directly above them. Thank God for polio vaccines, making this nightmare totally obsolete. Not all photography was about tragedy, though. Ormond Gigley arranged 43 women in colorful dresses across New York brownstone windows in 1960. The buildings were getting torn down, so he created this artistic shot to preserve their beauty. The whole production required coordinating dozens of models and costumes to create one of photography's most famous images. This Manhattan building became America's first newspaper photograph in the Daily Graphic in 1873. The halftone process finally allowed papers to show real photos instead of just drawings. This completely changed journalism and how information spread. Before this, most people had never seen actual photos of faraway places or events. This is Conrad Heyer posing at age 103 in 1852, making him one of the earliest born people ever photographed. Born in 1749, he'd lived through America's entire journey from colonies to independence to industrial power. Imagine all the changes this guy saw in over a century. Fast forward to the digital revolution. Philippe Kahn created the very first cell phone picture of his newborn daughter Sophie in June '97. He rigged up a digital camera to his phone in Santa Cruz, California, and instantly shared the photo with family. In 1922, kids in a schoolyard got swimming lessons despite having zero access to actual water. Teachers have always found creative ways to make learning fun, or maybe traumatizing, depends on who you're talking to. Light opera singer Hilda Clark shows up in this 1900 Coca-Cola ad, becoming the brand's first celebrity endorser. Her classy image gave Coke respectability back when it still had actual cocaine in it. This started the celebrity marketing that dominates advertising today. Some photos caught places before they became legendary. The Hollywood sign originally said Hollywoodland when they put it up in '23 to advertise real estate. It was supposed to last 18 months, but accidentally became permanent when the company went bankrupt. They chopped off the land part in '49, creating today's icon. This is the last photo of real samurai warriors in Japan from 1868. Most had already ditched their traditional look as Japan went full modern, making this a final glimpse of a warrior culture that had ruled for centuries. This moment shows the atomic bomb getting loaded onto the plane in America that would drop it on Nagasaki in August '45. They called it Fat Man, and Major Charles Sweeney piloted the B-29 bomber boxcar that delivered it.
The US dropped atomic bombs on the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
This was actually the second atomic bomb after Hiroshima 3 days earlier failed to make Japan surrender. Fat Man killed over 70,000 people instantly and ended World War II within days as Emperor Hirohito finally announced surrender. Here's colonial inequality in one ridiculous shot. Nepali workers hauling a Rolls-Royce through mountain passes in 1950 because there were no roads. British officials demanded their luxury regardless of the human cost. Here you can see German spiked helmets called Pickelhauben piled up in this massive pyramid outside Grand Central in 1919. American forces collected thousands as war trophies after World War I. These leather helmets with metal spikes were designed to deflect sword blows during cavalry charges back when soldiers fought with sabers instead of machine guns. The spike made German soldiers instantly recognizable and became a symbol of Prussian militarism. But by World War I, trench warfare made them useless against bullets and shrapnel, so Germany switched to steel helmets in 1916. After beating Germany, Americans displayed these helmet pyramids as victory symbols showing they had conquered the once feared German war machine that terrorized Europe for 4 years. This 1868 photo shows a slave auction happening even after the Civil War, which supposedly ended slavery. Some places kept the illegal slave trade going, proving that legal freedom didn't immediately stop human trafficking. The Great Depression pushed families to unthinkable choices. This "For Children for Sale" sign showed up outside a Chicago home in '48, where the Chalifoux family faced eviction and starvation. These desperate parents literally put their kids up for sale. Within 2 years, all 5 kids, including an unborn baby, got sold to different families, some ending up in situations arguably worse than their original poverty. Claude Detlofs, Wait for Me Daddy shows 5-year-old Warren Bernard breaking away to chase his father as the British Columbia Regiment marches off to World War II in 1940. This spontaneous moment of a kid's love became one of the war's most beloved photos. Here's Diego Maradona clearly using his hand to punch the ball past England's goalkeeper during Argentina's World Cup win in '86, but somehow convincing the referee it was a legal header. In soccer, you can only touch the ball with your feet, head, or body, but never your hands unless you're the goalkeeper in your own penalty box. Players get immediately penalized for handball, and the other team gets a free kick or penalty. But Maradona jumped up and clearly punched the ball into the goal with his left fist, while the referee and linesman somehow missed it completely. Maradona later said it was scored a little with the head of Maradona and a little with the hand of God, coining the hand of God phrase for one of soccer's most infamous cheating moments. This is NASA before PowerPoint existed. Scientists had to make giant charts by hand to present data. Way more work than clicking through slides, but probably kept audiences more awake. This is General Douglas MacArthur signing Japan's surrender documents on the USS Missouri in Tokyo Bay, September 2, 1945. This signature officially ended World War II and the deadliest conflict in human history. Political divisions could split cities overnight. Workers building the Berlin Wall in August '61, dividing East and West Berlin as communist authorities sealed the border. Families got separated without warning, and this concrete barrier stood for 28 years as the ultimate Cold War symbol. Dorothea Lange's migrant mother from 36 shows, 32-year-old Frances Thompson, and her kids at a failed farm camp in California. After crops froze and work disappeared, Thompson sold her car tires for food money. Her kids caught birds to supplement their diet. This became the defining photo of Great Depression suffering. Sam Shear captured the Hindenburg exploding at Lakehurst in May '37, killing 36 people as the hydrogen-filled airship became a fireball. This photo ended passenger airships forever. The radio guy screaming, "Oh, the humanity," made it even more traumatic and famous. COVID forced healthcare workers to get creative when families couldn't visit dying patients. Brazilian hospitals started using these fake hands to comfort COVID patients so they wouldn't die alone. Ukrainian President Viktor Yushchenko in before and after shots showing dioxin poisoning effects that many think Russian agents did during his 2004 campaign. The poison was probably slipped into his food to kill him, but Yushchenko survived despite permanent disfigurement and still won the election. Sometimes desperation drives extreme choices. James Verone robbed a bank for exactly $1 in 2011 just to get healthcare in prison. This North Carolina delivery guy suffered from untreated conditions he couldn't afford to fix. He handed the teller a note demanding $1, then waited for cops to arrest him. Historical beauty standards seem insane today. This Hungarian woman is getting freckle removal treatment with some mechanical contraption in 1937. Freckles were considered ugly back then, leading women to undergo painful procedures. Animals can be as wild as humans. This is Penelope the platypus, who faked pregnancy at the Bronx Zoo in 1947 to get double food and luxury treatment. For 16 weeks, zookeepers thought she was carrying eggs until they finally checked her burrow and found nothing. She escaped the next year and was never found. Lieutenant Colonel Robert Sturm's reunion with his family after 5 years as a Vietnam POW in 1973 created the Pulitzer-winning burst of joy photo, but Sturm had actually gotten divorce papers 3 days before this supposedly happy homecoming. Some family stories show the darkest human nature. French socialite Blanche Monnier got discovered in 1901 after 25 years locked in her family's attic because her mother hated her wanting to marry a poor lawyer. Police found her weighing 55 pounds, covered in filth, living in her own waste, cut off from sunlight and human contact. Her own mother imprisoned her, rather than let her make her own marriage choice. Artist Alfie Bradley created this massive sculpture showing UK knife violence scale and weapon removal efforts. This 27-foot piece is made from 100,000 knives surrendered to British police. Photographer Hippolyte Bayard staged his own death in 1840 to protest the French government's ignoring of his photography invention. This fake suicide shot was the first staged photo ever. Roger Fenton's Valley of the Shadow of Death from 1855 shows cannonballs scattered across a Crimean War battlefield, one of the first powerful war aftermath images. In 2024, surgeons in Zurich performed surgery on a pig in Hong Kong using just a video game controller to control instruments across 5,700 miles. This Hiroshima pocket watch stopped at exactly 8:15 a.m., the moment the atomic bomb went off on August 6, 1945. Medical students spent 1,500 hours dissecting this complete nervous system in 1925. This specimen helped train generations of doctors. After September 11th, the Maasai tribe in Kenya donated 14 cows to America, their most valuable possessions, to help grieving Americans. These herders, with almost nothing, understood their cattle represented life and prosperity, making this one of the most meaningful solidarity gestures after the attacks. August Landmesser, standing with arms crossed, refusing the Nazi salute during a 1936 ceremony that Hitler himself attended. This lone guy got identified decades later. Everyone around him is throwing up their arm in the mandatory Heil Hitler salute, while he just stands there with his arms folded, while in Nazi Germany refusing to salute could mean imprisonment, torture, or death, especially with Hitler watching. And the Nazis had already destroyed his life, so he had nothing left to lose. This single act of defiance became one of history's most powerful images of individual resistance against totalitarian pressure. Tech creates weird coincidences. Microsoft Outlook's default icon supposedly looks like Bill Gates' '77 mugshot when he got arrested for traffic violations in New Mexico. The 21-year-old Harvard dropout got cited for running a red light without a license. This wild wolf lived normally despite having a large tree branch permanently stuck between its jaws for several years. Wildlife experts were amazed it could hunt and eat enough to survive with such a handicap. Vietnamese revolutionary Vo Thi Thang kept her defiant smile even after getting sentenced to 20 years of hard labor, creating the smile of victory photo. Even animals get psychological trauma like humans. Baby elephant Zhuang Zhuang cried for 5 straight hours after his mother rejected and tried attacking him at a Chinese reserve. Elephant mothers sometimes reject calves in captivity without their natural herd support system. Nicephore Niepce captured this in 1826, the oldest surviving camera photograph. It shows the view from his French window using a bitumen-coated pewter plate. President Lyndon B. Johnson had this amphibious car that he used to prank visitors at his ranch in 1965. He'd be driving guests around, then suddenly head straight for the lake while they're screaming, thinking they're about to drown. The car would hit the water and just keep going like a boat. Make sure to subscribe for more hidden history, and let me know in the comments which photo shocked you the most.